And so today the focus shall be upon the great pioneering, profoundly influential anime series Mobile Suit Gundam. In particular, we will be using the first of its free theatrical compilation films as our discussion's gravity. I'm going to try and frame this episode for those who may not be familiar with the Gundam mythos, or perhaps even anime in general, although I am something of a relatively recent inductee into Gundam appreciation myself, and my knowledge of anime, certainly in regard to television programming or ongoing OVA series, is limited overall. Hopefully though, this would actually make it easier to explain and articulate why this particular tradition of animation, especially as it manifests in the successive work of its creator, Yoshiyuki Tomino, is such a profound and poignant wave of revolutionary film language, and almost the finest realization of animation's spatial superiority to live-action photography. This realm of animation allowed for such impressive feats of theoretical engineering and geometrical precision to see a fluid execution within the cinema medium. Now let me explain this, because some of what I'm about to share here about the series' production context, its conceptual design and basis, might sound bewildering, although hear us out. Mobile Suit Gundam certainly was not the first mecha anime to exist in Japan. There were a few precedents in the 1960s, and plenty in the 1970s, such as Getter Robo, Mazinga, Brave Raiden, or Steel Jeeg. I haven't really seen any of these, but they exist. Yoshiyuki Tomino worked on some of these as a writer and or director, including on the aforementioned Brave Raiden, as well as Volts V, Invincible Superman Zambot Free, and Steelman Daitan Free. It was on this latter show that Tomino was introduced to contracted mechanical designer Kunio Okawara. Tomino employed Okawara in designing realistic mecha for a new kind of giant robot anime. I was reading an interview with Okawara, and who claims that he did not have all that much personal interaction with Tomino. Mostly he was given instructions from him and sent back his resultant mecha designs. Okawara implies that, with the series' iconic RX-78-2 Gundam, Tomino had sent him the initial designs, which Okawara had attempted to make three-dimensional. This was also apparently the case for the design of the various Zeon combat armors to be featured in the series. I have heard that the original design for the RX-78-2 Gundam be cited as one of the few examples of true hard science fiction in the medium, due to its claimed coherent basis on the science of mechanical engineering. Tomino is said to have been inspired specifically by Robert Heinlein's power armor from his 1959 Starship Troopers novel, and Heinlein was someone who tried to take that sort of thing very seriously. It seems perplexing and bonkers that the Gundam is scientifically achievable with the right amount of sheer resources and energy flow, but that's what they intended. Someone feel free to confirm or dispute this in the comments. Well, let's hear it from Tomino himself, what he was going for with Mobile Suit Gundam. The bottom line is, I wanted to have a more realistic robot series, unlike a super robot, where everything is more reality-based, based on a humanoid robot. Right from the beginning, the roots of the Mobile Suit came from the worker robots that were building the space colonies back then, and they would become more technologically advanced to the point of becoming a weapon, and that was the whole lineage of the robots I had in mind since the beginning. So the whole idea, my idea, of trying to have a robot series in space without it becoming a stupid story was based on wanting to make a story and surrounding it with reality. More realistic possibilities was the underlying concept. I ought to clarify, giant mecha anime prior to Mobile Suit Gundam has been retroactively referred to as Super Robot, whereas Mobile Suit Gundam is said to have pioneered a new form, Real Robot. I have also accessed another quote from Tomino about what motivated the creation of Mobile Suit Gundam. In regard to your first question as to why I think Gundam has been popular for 30 years, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't be struggling every day. If I knew the answer, I would already be working on my next work, which would be released next year. It's because I don't know the answer to that I'm searching and questioning and asking and struggling and trying to find the answer. I just take each day as it comes. I try to go with the flow of things. I don't have that perfect answer. But if I may sort of toot my own horn for a moment, when I started out in this field, the field that centered around giant robots or robots that looked like humans, they tended to be kind of ridiculed. They were considered characters, not real people, and they were not taken seriously. In my only display of brilliance and talent is that I took this concept and I really didn't talk about robots, or human-like robots. I talked about mobile suits. I think that is where the secret of our success lay. In other words, by creating this new phrase, mobile suit, I think we were able to give the Gundam series a completely different aspect that differentiated it from the robot stories that seemed to be only for children. I believe we were able to develop a fan base that viewed these mobile suit robots as very different from what had come before. In fact, in Japan, when we look at the Gundam series, we don't look at them as robot stories, but as real robot stories that are considered a slightly different subgenre. I mentioned earlier in my comments that I thought the Disney stories were too simplistic. Having said that, however, I would also like to point out that if you are telling a story, it has to fundamentally be very simple. But one thing I think is very unique to the Gundam series is that you have heroes and you have enemies, but they are both viewed as people with concerns. They are both viewed equally. Before I started working in this genre, any enemies were always foreign agents. The fact that for the first time we introduced human beings as both heroes and villains meant that over time, as the storyline progressed, sometimes people would change sides. You can see this was a completely radical approach for the genre. In fact, it brought these stories into the realm of regular human dramas, and I think that's even a step even the Disney films, despite their great technology, were not able to enter. So I don't think that we started out trying to create a simple storyline simply because it was for children. That's not the approach that we took at all. What we were trying to do was tell the story of a war. As a result, these were the kind of characters that appeared. The fact that these characters are slightly different from actual people and that they involve these suits was just sort of a side effect. The original story was about human beings. I come from a cinematic background. I have a simple belief in regard to films. That is that these are moving pictures. Moving pictures should be used to tell stories, and it doesn't really matter whether the end audience is going to be people of a certain age, or children, adults, etc. I think fundamentally, if you have a story to tell, you should just tell your story. If anyone views me as being successful simply because I was able to enter the right genre, I would consider my work a failure. Think of Mobile Suit Gundam as originating from an individual who had worked somewhat dispassionately or for income reasons in the super robot anime industry. He had become frustrated, claustrophobic, looked back to what motivated the likes of Osamu Tezuka, and thought to himself, wait a minute, why are we doing this? To sell toys? I thought we were trying to tell quality, meaningful stories. Well, why not both? Tomino clearly respected great cinema, as he stated in that previously quoted passage, and so he intuitively realized that a degree of visual fluency in moving pictures was required. It didn't matter how engaging or polished a film story was. And this brings me to the most admirable facet of the Mobile Suit Gundam series, and the work of Yoshiyuki Tomino in general, the understanding of space. Tomino opened up a world in 2D animation wherein the geometrical possibilities of mechanical engineering could be limitlessly explored. And then he also gave them the ability to move about in the air and through outer space. The unsung profundity of animation, 2D or 3D, is making us as a species realize the degree to which we take for granted the concept of space. The psychological affect of space isn't often discussed, although consider how one thinks about existence on a beach in comparison to when inside a studio apartment. As the incomparable Sun Ra might say, space is the place. So naturally this is going to apply to the media we view. 12 Angry Men is watchable and intense and involving because of its understanding of space. Toy Story worked because of its understanding of space, itself inspired by Kubrick's for his The Shining. Spatial awareness is everything, or at least an incredible amount, of an audience's subconscious involvement with a series of moving pictures. Now, I do think that this element is more beautifully explored in later Tomino works, although there is certainly a basis, a precedent for it within the original Mobile Suit Gundam series. Here is where he clearly first has the idea to try and authentically, believably realize his ideal narratives. Many previous anime might merely seek to slap a few drawings together in an attempt to mimic the panels of a manga issue, utilizing that style and, de facto, dismissing a coherent understanding of space within and amongst a narrative in question. This persists to this day, or at least for decades afterward. Is there a good understanding of space within Dragon Ball Z? No, not whatsoever. That which the series prided itself on, all of those vainglorious, overhyped fight scenes, are barely even choreographed. Now, to be fair, nothing about Dragon Ball Z is good, really. Especially in not being tied to loyalty for an original manga, Mobile Suit Gundam was a free and liberated anime, free to express itself visually, enunciate itself aesthetically, however it so felt. But at the same time, it was one of the most well-written, certainly most well-written, animated television or television shows of all time, and to this day. I'll prove it to you. Why is it that in this brutal storyline about war, betrayal, weaponry, space travel, political strife, and gigantic robotics, that the most memorable scene in the narrative is about three characters attempting to fix a car which has broken down on the side of the road? Anyone who has seen the series, they're tearing up right now at me just mentioning that scene. Anyone who hasn't seen the series, do watch it and find out why. It's only 43 episodes long. You can do it. I believe in you. I have been discussing the Mobile Suit Gundam series in general, rather than this specific feature film compilation. The trilogy of Mobile Suit Gundam features were released theatrically in 1981 and 1982. The theatrical release of this first film in particular, and its smash blockbuster success in Japan, has been cited as the day when it became apparent that anime was a more mainstream phenomenon than ever before, and was also undergoing a major change as it did so. Possibly this is when it started to become more geared toward older audiences, or at least I suspect so. The day will come when I discuss the next two films, and when this happens, I shall discuss the series in even more detail, including the narrative events and impressive animation which are to follow. I don't necessarily recommend watching this condensed film trilogy if you have not seen the actual series, although personally I find it more convenient now to view the trilogy if I'd like to experience the sensations associated with Mobile Suit Gundam again, having already seen the show once. This is more out of convenience, but also, just realistically, I don't necessarily feel like watching the entire series again, or at least I haven't yet, so much as I felt a yearning to experience again, at select times, the best of the series, its most gallant narrative highs. Narratively, this series was more influential than it was aesthetically, arguably. Amuro popularizes the young protagonist, and within this gritty, grounded genre title that was in contrast to the glossy children's media of prior decades. An emphasis on realism where violence was concerned appears to have cast an enormous shadow in subsequent anime history. Most importantly, and most gloriously, however, is, of course, Char's deception of Gamma in the midst of the battlefield, and taking place within the runtime of this first film, acting as what might be the very first, or the popularizer, of what we could affectionately refer to as the anime betrayal. When the Mobile Suit Gundam series initially begins, we smile at the prospect and swift sighting of well-animated, efficiently, ingeniously, realistically storyboarded giant mecha action. As the series comes to its end, we cry at the unfair, heart-wrenching tragedy that is Amuro, Char, and Lala. I mean, can you even comprehend that? How is this the case? Did I watch it wrong somehow? Did I miss something more profound about the series and had to crudely rely on my emotional involvement with its story? No. I think that Yoshiyuki Tomino is an artistic genius.